Sadly, we won't play some games today. I have a controller. It will be used for other actions. My name is Tobiasz Dobrowolski. I'm an iOS developer at Droids On Roids in Wroclaw. And today I want to talk about game controller framework on iOS. But it's not what you think. We won't be coding a game. We will be coding an app on iOS, which will have support for the game controller. So let's start. It's a strange idea to code a mobile app that supports the game controller, because why would you do that? So when the lockdown happened 4 years ago, and there was a new framework that maybe you know, the SwiftUI framework. It was fresh back then, and so new consoles were also announced with the new UI that had great animations. And I had a great idea to maybe code some proof of concepts, the demo app that will try to replicate the animations and how the UI is fluid for and fast with the first version of the SwiftUI. And it wasn't a good idea because the first version of SwiftUI lacked some of the key features from UIKit. The project was in my shame folder. And this year, at the beginning of the year, I came back to it. And I finished it, actually, and I made my own version of the operation system, like the proof of concept of the operation system. It's just an app without like basic navigation that you know from the iPadOS and the iOS. It looks like this. It won't run Grand Theft Auto 6, so sadly, not yet. But the key to the concept was to control it with the game controller and touch, so you can swipe all the things, touch all the things. It works just like that, and also you can connect the controller and the app will respond to the actions. So it's powered by the game controller framework, which isn't new. It was actually announced 11 years ago with the iOS 7, I think. And like the most of the features that I will show you are available from the iOS 14.5, where the new controllers were added, support for them. Okay, so let's look what is supported. The game controller framework supports mouse, keyboard, Siri remote, racing wheels, DualSense, DualShock 4, and the Xbox controller. And today I will focus only on one, I think the best controller, which is a bit controversial. The DualSense controller, which is the primary controller for the PlayStation 5. I said it's the best one, but it's the best one to show you the features because of the adaptive triggers, for example. So I will talk about adaptive triggers later. But I made some simpler app to show you the demo for the game controller, which looked like this. So at the top we have something that looks like navigation, like you can select between images and videos. You have the icon that will show you if you have the controller connected, and the scroll view that has screenshots that you took in the app. Like, it's a proof of concept. It doesn't work as you expect. It's just a demo, but you can control it with the game controller by selecting on the D-pad the left or right, and it will just animate to the next item or the previous item. So actually the idea for this app is kind of cool, and I think it could be in the App Store. I see people using it, but there is one problem. Imagine that you are playing a game, for example, the Resident Evil 4, and you took a screenshot, because if you select the share button on the controller when you are connected, it actually works. You can take a screenshot or record a video. So there is no support for multitasking, so you can switch between apps. So this app is cool, but not for iOS 17 or 18, I think. I didn't check it with 18, but I don't think they added the multitasking. But actually on macOS you can't multitask with controllers, so it's a bit strange, but I'm looking forward to the next version of iOS to support it. And there's a cool feature that is hidden actually in your iPhone and iPad. When you have connected the controller and you press the, for example, PlayStation button, which is a home button in the console, it will show you the game center, which is controlled by the controller. So I can just select up and down, left, right, and I can navigate through the app. This is laggy and bugged, so it's not great, but it is there. I think it's a bit forgotten by Apple, and I look forward to fix some of the visual bugs on it. Yeah, so it's hidden, and maybe we will see something with it in the future. So let's start by making our app. the first thing you have to do is to add the game controller's capability in your project. So when you do it, the game controller framework is imported to the project. Next, what we have to do is go to the signing and capabilities pane and then select one of the three the gamepad's profiles, or maybe all of them. It depends what you want. I choose the extended gamepad, which is for the DualSense controller, and we can see the types of the gamepads that are supported here. The extended gamepad is all the controllers that you have in your head when you think about the controller. So 2 analog sticks, triggers, shoulder buttons, D-pads, and primary buttons. Micro gamepad is the first generation C remote, and the directional gamepad is the second generation C remote, but it's a downgrade because it doesn't support motion or rotation. So I go with the extended gamepad for now. And okay, so imagine that you have the iOS device and the controller is connected because you connect it by the Bluetooth, like the AirPods or other Bluetooth device. But if you want to use it in our app, we have to respond to the notifications that did connect or did disconnect, and I'm doing it right there. Actually, it's more simpler way to code this, because if you want, in the closure you get the controller that was connected. But in my case, I support only one controller because you can support more than one in your app. So I'm taking all connected controllers and I'm taking the first one because why not? Okay, so about the notifications, the 2 of them which I showed you, the did connect and did disconnect, are not the only ones that are available. There are also did become current and did stop being current, which is being used for more controllers when you have the primary controller which can control the game, for example, and when it will stop being the primary controller and the change will happen, you will get notification for that. And also there is the user customizations, the change notification, which will tell you about customizations that changed, but I will tell you about later. The key to this notification is that the user can remap the buttons in the iOS system settings. For example, when I press A, it could be the B button or something like that. So if you are creating a good UI and you want to show the right buttons for it. Yeah, so I will tell more about it later. Okay, so that's the code I showed you that discovers that something was connected and did disconnect, but it's wrapped now in the game controller service class that I created. And what I want to do is to store the current controller in the current value subject if it was connected, and I want to bind to it later. But what is the GC controller object? It's actually the game controller object, and it represents physical or virtual controller. We can access controller profile from it, and as you can see, a lot of features are supported: the keyboard, mouse, the gamepad profiles that I showed you earlier. But today we will focus on the DualSense. There's also a Xbox gamepad and DualShock gamepad. We can work with the extended gamepad for most of the time if we want to respond to like all the buttons that are entered from the like normal controller. But if you want to access the specific features that are supported only for this controller, like in DualSense it will be adaptive triggers, or for example controlling the light of the controller, then we have to cast it as the DualSense gamepad. Okay, so we are still in the game controller service class. We are binding to the current value subject, which is current controller, and we are handling the current controller change in this method. So first I'm checking if the controller is connected. If not, it means that it was disconnected, so it's it's the right time to clean up some things. And if it's connected, we can listen for current controller callbacks. And this is where the fun begins, or the hell begins, because as you can see, that's only a glimpse of what should be done in this case, but I'm using only the 5 buttons, which is the button A, the D-pad right, D-pad left, right shoulder, left shoulder. But if you want to support all the buttons in our app, we have to set up the closures for all of the buttons. Then we can check if the button was actually pressed. We have in the closure, we have the button object, we have the value object, which is the value from 0 to 1, how hard it was pressed. So in this case, like the button A, we can't get the value of how hard it was pressed because button A doesn't have the sensor for it. But for example, when we are implementing the trigger implementation, we can get how hard the user pressed the trigger and respond to that. So what I will do is not from this closure run some method that will do something on the UI. I want to map it to like the custom enum that I made. This is the best option, I think, to create some enum with the buttons that are supported in your app. In my case, that was the enums. Yeah, so I will send the information about the button input to the pass-through subject because I don't want to store it. I just want to send a signal that something was pressed, and my view models in the app will subscribe to it and respond to the action per view model and per view. Okay, so this is what it looks like with sending the pass-through subject. Okay, so now let's go to the view model that it's subscribing to the game controller service. We have our app and the arrows that will show you which code is responsible for the data in it. Yeah, so showing the controller icon when the controller is connected, I'm actually binding the current controller. If it's nil, it means that there is no controller. If it's not nil, there is controller, and I'm showing the icon. And as you can see, I'm also subscribing to the button input, but I'm mapping it to another enum. And I think it's a good idea to get a better context in terms of our view model. So I don't want to, if button A was pressed, do something, but I want to parse it to some other action, and it's better for readability, I think. So yeah, this is the enum. This is the extension for the enum that I've created. So when I press button A, I want the select media item. When left, I want the previous media item, next media item, and the same with the menu. And this is better, in my opinion, in terms of readability. Okay, so when we have mapped our actions, we can respond to that. So this is like the basic code for selecting next or previous media item that I store in some array. So I'm checking if it exists. I don't want to go out of bounds, and I just assigning the selected media item to the next or previous item which I selected with my controller. Okay, so now let's go to the SwiftUI view, which looks like this. This is just a glimpse of it. This is the scroll view reader with a proxy that will be used for us to do the animation scroll to. It's not perfect yet. I saw that there is some addition with the iOS 18 to the scroll view, but this is based on the iOS 17. And yeah, I'm just putting the lazy H stack and the capture cell view, which has its own ID, and with on-tap gesture, when you tap on it, it will select and navigate to it on the scroll view. And you can also select it with the controller from the view model that I showed you the logic. So yeah, you don't have to make some if logic. So when touch do this, when controller do this, you can support it like in the same time. So yeah, it was actually very easy, and I was quite surprised that it's that easy. So I will show you that I'm not lying, and it works really. I will try to connect the controller with the MacBook. And as you can see, there's a funny thing, maybe not funny for the developers, but if you have the game controller icon is showed, but no controller is connected actually. And this is the iOS simulator, and it has a bug, I don't know, maybe a feature that will show you that there is always controller connected. And when I'm trying to check what controller it is, it doesn't give me any info about the name of it. It's just a empty string. So I don't know. Yeah, I connected the controller now. So I will try to change the images and videos tab, which do nothing, but it changes, so it's great. And I can select the media in the scroll view. I will go to the right, and I can scroll it. And it works like that. And I will try to show you that we can do this with touch also, so when I tap on it, it just works, and yeah, so no crash, good. Back to the presentation. So that was an app, but there is a lot of features that we can support also with the controller. And for example, we can get some information about the controller, the battery, and not only the percentage, how much it is charged, but also the current action of the battery, if it's charging, if it's discharging, or it's connected and not charging. So for example, when you want to create some cool UI with the icon when it's charging, when it's not charging, you can do that. The product category is the string it's the Apple name for the controller. In this case, it was DualSense. The physical input profile is the physical input profile, and player index is actually very useful if you support multiple controllers. If you want to like ID them, which is which, and which should take action, you have the player index for that. The vendor name, in context of the DualSense, it's how Sony named it, so it will be the DualSense wireless controller, blah, blah, blah. And there's also a light property, which is very cool, but not all controllers support it. And if you are not familiar with the PlayStation consoles, the light on the controller is supported on the DualSense controller and the DualShock controller. Like the DualShock controller has more light to it, so it's cooler, but DualSense controller also supports it, and you can get the property light, which will tell you the RGB values that are set right now. When I connected it to the MacBook, it's blue, and when I connect it to the iOS, it's orange. I don't know why. It looks like it's discharged, but it's just the characteristic of the system, I think. And we can actually set the color, which is very cool, and this is the code for it. So I'm taking the UI color argument, I'm converting it to RGB values, and I'm setting the current controller light color object to the current RGB values that I wanted to set. And that's very cool, but you have to be cautious because some colors are not affecting the controller. For example, you can set the black color to the light because it doesn't work. So the best way is to set some vivid colors to it, like the blue, orange, red, something like that. And you can use it for the user experience in your game or your app. But on consoles, for example, if you are playing with multiplayer game on the co-op, for example, on the couch, you can see that some of the controllers on the same team could have the same color, and other team will have the other color. So it's better in terms of user experience. Okay, so the next cool thing is the haptic feedback, and it's just vibrations, which are supported, I think, on all of the controllers. In the newer controllers, it's better supported, but yeah, you can access it with no new technology to control it. You can just use core haptics. So you create haptic event and haptic pattern, create the pattern player, and start haptic engine with its properties set. And you have to remember to turn it off and clean the haptic engine if you want to. Yeah, so it's cool that we can use the same technology from iPhone to the controllers. It's actually very easy to code. Okay, so now adaptive triggers. This is something which is unique to the DualSense controller, as we earlier worked on the extended gamepad profile. We now have to use the DualSense gamepad profile, because to access the left trigger and right trigger adaptive settings, we have to use it on the DualSense. And as you can see in this code demo, I'm assigning left trigger and right trigger. I'm setting the mode feedback with start position, which is one of the options that you can use. And the start position is, I will try to show you. The start position is when the resistance should take place from 0 to 1, at which percent. At this point, when I will try to push it at the start, I will feel the resistance, which is set to 0.3. So you can set it, the two values are set from 0 to 1. And yeah, and that's not the only option. But first thing is that when you set this, it's set forever. So when you played some like PlayStation 5 game that supports the adaptive triggers. My favorite is the God of War Ragnarok, for example. I think it uses the adaptive triggers very good, and it changes often. But I admire how developers put a hard work into it, because actually every change to the adaptive trigger has to be set and cleaned and set and cleaned and something like that. So if you want to clean the effect, you just go with the set mode off to clean up the adaptive triggers settings. And yes, so there's more. We can support a lot more features with the adaptive triggers. We can, for example, set that at the beginning, when you are pushing the adaptive trigger, it is set to some light resistance, and then when you pushed harder and harder with that adaptive trigger, it will give you a more resistance, which is very cool. But yeah, there's a lot of code to achieve this. So yeah, kudos to the game developers for supporting it. Yes, so the last thing, but not least, is the handling brands and remapped buttons. So if you're familiar with the console market and with the controllers, you can see that PlayStation controllers have the cross button, for example, and the triangle button, and Xbox controllers have the A and Y buttons. And if we are creating our app or game, we want to support all the controllers. So I don't want to switch if Xbox then do something and show this UI. I just want to get the information right from the game controller framework, and it's actually possible, and it's very easy. So we can go with this code that will get the SF symbol name that we can use in the image, and actually it's very great because the SF symbol supports all the buttons for the Xbox controllers, for the PlayStation controllers, and that unique that has no brand, for example, which is very good, and I was quite surprised that works very well. Also, we have the option to get the localized name for the button. So if you want to present to the user the string that press a button and you don't want to switch between what controller is connected, you can get the localized name, and it will be press the button, which will be from the localized name property. Yeah, so it's supported actually very good. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you today, and if you want to see a more complex version of what I showed today, you can get my repository for the Helium OS, which is the proof of concept for the operation system that I've made. It's very simple, but actually I think the code that's under it is very useful, because you can't find a lot of information about supporting the game controller in normal apps, because who does it? So you can check the repository. And yeah, so one last thing is I want to tell you about the meetup that we are hosting in Wroclaw. I'm co-hosting it. It's called Let's Swift. It's for iOS developers, and we are having a new event next week at Wrocław. So if you are from Wrocław or you want to participate in the stream, you can go at our Facebook page or our Twitter page. Just type Let's Swift. And yeah, so that's all from me today, and thank you for listening.
Because you mentioned that there's always a game controller attached when you're in simulator. Isn't that because of the keyboard in a Mac being connected to the iOS device?
Yeah, so about I think I can scroll to it. Yeah, about the connected game controller to the simulator, if we have any connected. I don't think it's the keyboard, because it's called I'm not sure now, but I think it was called something like the gamepad profile. So it gives you the idea that some gamepad is connected. And yeah, so I don't know why it's that. Yeah, I just wanted to test on the simulator that there is the image that something was connected, but I had to compile it on the iPhone. Yeah, so yeah.
Have you tried accessing the
gyroscope of the? Yeah, so I didn't try to access the gyroscope because I was overwhelmed by all the options, but it's possible. Yeah, it's a good point. It's possible, and also about some strange, like cool, strange things that you can access also about despite the motion is you can get the controller touchpad position of the finger. Actually, you can select, you can get the 2 fingers, so it's the multi-touch, and also the game, like this is the button also, so you can get the button input from the touchpad also. Yeah, so I didn't play with yet.
And this is
For DualSense, yeah, but the same works for the DualShock because it has the touchpad too. Yeah. Yeah. So more questions? Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you.